Hello there, everybody. Now, a quick warning to you all. This is a tough watch. If you are at all worried about losing any intelligence, please avert your gaze, because this really is one of the dumbest NHS debates you are ever likely to witness. It contains Dan Wootton and Carol McGiffin, and if I'm being generous to them both, I would say they have a combined IQ of a loaf of bread. And that's if I'm being generous. It also contains one of the biggest monsters to have infiltrated our political discourse in recent times, Calvin Robinson. Interestingly, he usually turns up to these debates wearing his religious clobber, but on this occasion, as you can see, it appears he decided to get dressed in the dark. I mean, who on earth wears a beige corduroy jacket in 2023? And doing her bit on behalf of sanity on the right there is Rebecca Reid. So let's take a look. And like I say, be patient with this one because it contains a lot of stupidity.
McGiff, I've just had it with these strikes. I've had it with them. And these doctors can try and spin it as much as they want, but they have been totally unreasonable with a 35% pay demand.
Unrealistic as well. And I think deep down they know it's not going to go anywhere. It can't. There is not the money. And it doesn't matter how much waste the NHS cuts. If they cut most of it, they probably could afford to give everybody a pay rise. But there just isn't the money and it's not going to happen. So if you're starting at that point, there's nowhere to go.
By the way, that whole "there's no money" talking point, I know I don't need to start reeling off a list of government wastage to you good folks, but the many tens of billions pissed down the drain. Ugh. So for her to sit there after all this time and still be coming out with this rubbish is a combination of stupid and offensive, quite frankly.
And who's suffering? Who's suffering? The people who've been suffering for the last 3 years not being able to get treatment. And then suddenly they're on strike. And the advice that they're giving to people, don't come to the hospital. Think twice before you go to A&E. And they said they've actually admitted they're putting out harsher warnings to people because people didn't stay away last time. Hang on, if people are sick, what choice do they have? What can they do?
Have they not learned the risks of telling people to stay away from the health service, which is what we experienced throughout 2020, and look at where it got us?
Exactly.
When you go to A&E, half the people in there do not need to be there. A lot of people go to A&E when they...
Yeah, but the problem is the people who
because they can't get to see a doctor most of the time.
Yeah, that's true. But the people who are going to listen to that sort of warning, Rebecca, are the types of people who actually do need to be able to go to the hospital. But look, Calvin Robinson, you think these healthcare workers should actually be outlawed from striking? It should actually be illegal, this strike?
Yeah. If you're a healthcare professional, you should not be allowed to take time off work for strikes.
By the way.
I think they're putting lives at risk. They are politicising healthcare. That is damaging. It's dangerous. To say to the public, avoid risky behaviour. I mean, people get ill, people get sick, so they go to the hospital. I would actually sack them all and replace them if we could. I think it's entirely irresponsible. We spend, what, over $5,500 every second on the NHS. How are we going to find 35% pay increases for every single person? It's entitlement is what it is.
Entitlement. Yes, they are entitled to a pay rise. I mean, what an oddball this guy is. Advocating for the firing and replacing of doctors, but of course adding the caveat of, if we could. Yeah, well, we can't, Calvin, because we have 9,000 medical vacancies within the NHS as it is. And there's some historic levels of irony taking place here from Calvin Robinson. To say doctors are putting lives at risk by going on strike, but sacking them all would be what, Calvin? That wouldn't be putting their lives at risk? No? How bloody stupid.
If they get it, then everyone will want it.
Exactly that, the whole of the public sector.
But what is risky behaviour? It's like, oh, don't eat fish.
Sorry, she nearly made me choke on my Ribena. Eating fish. So when doctors say, please don't engage in any risky behaviour, the first thing that comes into Carol McGiffin's mind is eating fish. Oh. Well, this has left me with a real dilemma, because I was going to have mackerel for lunch. I'm going to have to think twice now.
You might swallow a bone. Well, exactly. Don't get into a
Maybe
car.
let's all not go rollerblading. Like, it's not rocket science.
No, this is ludicrous.
Let's all look twice before we cross the road.
No, it's
Are you
insane.
going to
Restricting everyone.
apologise
Am I
to
going
these
to apologise
doctors?
as a doctor?
No, as in,
If I do surgery
are
on
you
somebody,
going
I
to
wouldn't
make
need to apologise.
excuses for what they're doing? Putting our lives at
I don't
risk.
need to make excuses. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. It is a job. They're not heroes. They're not saints. They're not gods. They are people doing a job. And they've not had a proper pay rise for over 10 years. I think 15 years is the exact figure. Therefore, it's 35% over 15 years, which is 2.3% per year, which is a fairly reasonable amount.
No, they have had pay rise.
Not a meaningful one. The BMA says it's 2008. It's been quartered.
The
They've lost 25%
BMA is a
since 2008.
hard-left Marxist health union.
I mean,
Oh my god, I cannot stand him. It doesn't matter which trade union is being discussed, he always comes out with the same rubbish. A hard-left Marxist union. BMA, RMT, all hard-left Marxist unions. Oh, he doesn't seem to understand the trade union consists of sometimes many, many thousands of members with a wide spectrum of political views. I'm a member of a trade union, and within that trade union is a vast array of political opinion.
it's the medical association. It's the one that the doctors are in. Like, they know about being a doctor and they know how much they get paid. It is not unreasonable when you do an incredibly important, highly skilled, highly educated
So
career
you think,
to not
looking
get
at the
paid properly
current
for it.
economic climate, you think, given where we're at as a country financially, after the ridiculous decisions made during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, you think it is realistic for any public sector worker, including doctors,
Junior
to
doctors,
ask for
yeah.
a 35% pay rise?
I think, and again, I'm not an economist, but I think when you're trying to negotiate, you're supposed to ask for a bit more than you think you're going to get. So I think that presumably they're expecting less than 35%.
Okay, well, let me tell you.
Yes, I do think it's
anywhere close to that, then
But where would that money
bankrupt the
come from?
country.
Well, the NHS is monstrously mismanaged and incredibly inefficient. And presumably...
Yeah, but it's your
Suddenly
side
we're
of
going to fix
politics
that.
that refuses
It's not.
for there to be
There
any
are so
discussion
many-
about
No.
reform.
Look,
So
forget
much
reform. Let's just
reform.
privatise the
Can't have a
NHS.
discussion
Let's sell it off.
Everybody else is talking.
So Calvin Robinson, you say
Privatise the NHS. It's not working. It's a massive cash cow. It's just sinking money down the drain. Let's sell it off, privatise it. Let's find a different way.
The problem is, Carol McGiffin, is that
In a way, it's actually refreshing to hear a Conservative coming out with what we know a load of them genuinely believe. Not all of them, of course, but a large chunk. I just wonder how well such a comment would go down with your typical GB News viewer. Would they be standing up applauding, pumping their fist? Or would they be as disgusted as us sane folk? Have they genuinely been convinced privatisation is the only way to proceed? I really don't know the answer to that. I can't imagine NHS privatisation is popular at all. I've not seen any polling on it, but my gut feeling is I imagine that is extremely unpopular.
is that Rebecca talks about these doctors not being heroes and not being saints. But actually, that goes totally against the narrative that we've all been fed over the past decade, really, which is that the NHS is this absolute sacred cow. It must not be touched. It is a religion. We've all got to buy into it. And if you don't, then you're not proud to be British.
Yeah.
Another episode of staggering irony here. Let's just reflect for a moment and consider how much airtime GB News dedicates to gaslighting their viewers into believing they aren't patriotic if they don't support any number of outdated rubbish they would describe as British traditions or British values. And then Wootton has the cheek to pretend that we're now turning that on him, when genuinely the NHS is something to be proud of, whereas Edward Coulson statues, less so, Dan.
You can't criticise it, you can't say anything bad about it, and if you do, you're the devil. I do think that, in a way, though, it has been not privatised yet, but there is a lot of private elements to the NHS now. Most hospitals have a private floor, a whole floor for private treatment only. And when you go on a doctor's...
And all of the doctors work.
Yeah.
Well, not all of them, but a lot of them work
outside in private practice, yeah. And when you go on doctors' websites, for example, you see you can't get an appointment for, say, 2 months or whatever. But if you scroll down, you can get whatever treatment you want, but you have to pay for it. Now, if that's not privatisation, I don't know what is.
What on earth is she talking about? Someone help me out. I don't understand. So she's saying that you can book an appointment with a specialist privately, so that's privatisation of the NHS. Well, no, it's not. It's entirely different. A doctor can work both for the National Health Service and privately. It's not privatisation of the NHS if a doctor decides to work privately outside of their salaried NHS working time.
Because someone's getting some kind of backhander for that authority to be able to put that on
they're
there.
competing with themselves.
We are paying twice. Yeah, that's the point.
Fine, you should, like, if you
It's
can,
not fine,
if
it's
you,
not
if
working.
you
No, it's
can,
not.
if you can afford to pay twice, then you should pay twice.
Well, look,
People pay enough.
I've always said that I'm more than happy, actually, to pay privately to go and see the GP. But what would make me much more happy is if the NHS and Brits, actually, overall, politicians understood that free at the point of use isn't working. The health systems around the world that we look to actually work because they
Some
do
of them
have
do.
private
Not
public
all of them
partnerships,
do.
because they do have a
Not
degree
all
of
of them do.
pay-as-you-go for people who can afford it.
The problem is the American system is terrifying and dreadful. Now, there are lots of other systems that do work. The Australian system is pretty good. The German system is pretty good. My issue is that I do not trust any of the people currently in charge to roll out a German system.
Well, let me
system.
just tell you about the American system, right? It is great if you have insurance. Now, there's no way that as a country, as a society, given the sort of welfare state that we have, that we would ever not allow a safety net for those underprivileged in society who are not able to afford insurance.
Dan, we now have over 2 million people requiring food banks in the United Kingdom. Yes, people reliant on charities to make sure they do not starve. Some welfare state, that is. The reason the NHS is such a great concept is because everybody who uses it is equal. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter. Can you imagine the demonisation of people on welfare if it were only they having their medical expenses paid for by the taxpayer? That is not a society most of us wish to live in, Daniel. Poor people would die under an Americanized healthcare system in the United Kingdom. There is absolutely no doubt about it.
So saying that we're ever going to have an American system is just ludicrous, and it's the scare tactics that are used by the left, and that's what stops reform.
It's not a scare tactic, it's a genuine concern. If you look at what happened to the price of insulin, it is a very, very scary reality. There are middle-class people who are devastated. Giving birth costs
Come on, Rebecca.
minimum
No
$40,000.
government in this country would ever institute any form of private healthcare system
and of course you will be
where
fine.
there was no insurance
You are a
safety
very
net.
talented, brilliant person with a great job, but you don't have to worry for you. But for other people, it is a genuine fear. And it
We
really
all have
could
to worry.
happen.
You're totally missing the point. The reason that I worry, right, is because what is ludicrous and actually makes me so mad is that we are all reliant on the NHS. So I should,
have to be.
given what I
You
earn...
can pay for anything you want.
No, that's not true. Given what I earn, I should absolutely have to pay any time I want to go to the GP, any time I want
can
something
choose to.
simple like that. And I do.
Yeah.
And I do. But when I need the NHS is when I am diagnosed with some form of aggressive cancer,
You can
and as a
still pay to have
result
that
of
privately
the
treated.
huge issues that we have in our healthcare system, those medications are often not even available on the
That's
NHS.
fundamental.
What the hell is he talking about now? So he's saying he's happy to pay privately, but when it comes to being diagnosed with an aggressive cancer, he's reliant on the NHS. Does he not understand that the vast majority of these private healthcare providers offer cancer cover? Why does he think he has to switch back to the NHS when he has cancer? What a load of nonsense he's speaking. It sounds like, Dan, you're happy to pay privately for everything, so do it. What is he? God, he's really thick. I know. I don't know why I'm trying to apply logic to any of this, but Oh, God, it's hard.
Honestly untrue. You can absolutely have as much private healthcare as you like. There are many brands that you could take out.
Yes, but there
You
are
can have
also
private- I
many
know,
brands
you
of
can
private
you can
healthcare
have
that
private
do
cancer
not
treatment like
cover
that.
for all of those sorts of issues, which in America they would do. But look, the issue is, I think we're going to keep having the debate about the NHS on this show, but you won't see it in many other places in the media because it is the golden goose, it is the untouchable
Golden
discussion, and we've got to start having that discussion as a nation and be brave enough to do so. Rebecca Reid, Calvin Robinson, Carol McGiffin, my superstar panel are with me all night. But
Bully for them. He says that other media outlets aren't having NHS discussions. Well, yes, they are. Just not on this level of stupidity. Anyway, well done to Rebecca Reid for swimming against the current of lunacy that was flowing her way. Cheers for watching, folks, and goodbye.